lot of optimism around the sport. And the primary reason, if you watch that game, is youth being served. I think there is an argument that can be made that Derek Jeter has never really been fully replaced as the face of the sport. If you ask people out there the Q ratings to name a baseball player, he might still be the first one that most people mention. Alex Rodriguez might be the first or the second. Mike Trout has just never shown any interest in being that guy, and that just is what it is. Not everyone is meant to be that. Trout's a great baseball player, and that's all he's obligated to be. Bryce Harper has never quite become that, maybe because he's not quite good enough, maybe because he's not quite likable enough, maybe because his team is not quite relevant enough, one way or another. When Harper came up, I thought maybe he'd become the face of the sport. Trout certainly has the game to be the face of the sport. But now we enter the new generation. And when Vlad Guerrero Jr. is being named the All-Star MVP last night, at the age of 22, the youngest MVP in the history of that game, when he homers in the game, and only Johnny Bench ever hit a home run in an All-Star game younger than Vlad Guerrero Jr. is now. And you look around the field and you see Fernando Tatis Jr., who's also 22. And unfortunately, the injury to Acuna is a devastating blow, but that's a 23-year-old star who will be back. And Juan Soto is 22. And Shohei Ohtani, the biggest story of them all, is 27. Maybe, just for once, we can talk about great young players in baseball and not talk about exit velo, and not talk about spider tack, and not talk about the shift, and not talk about taking your starting pitcher out after 5 innings. Maybe, just maybe, we can actually have a conversation about a lot of great young players in the sport. It's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. No one loves that more than my main man, Hembo. Hembo, what was your number one takeaway from the All-Star Game last night?
This was the best week that baseball has had since before the pandemic. It was a great way to highlight all of the talent around the game. Obviously, a lot of the young talent that you mentioned, to me, is really the biggest story here. The Derby was outstanding. Pete Alonso put on a show. That was an outstanding event. And last night...
Ratings of that were huge, by the way, if I may.
They were. Mm-hmm.
I think they had the biggest rating they had in 5 years for that event, so
yes,
that's good.
That was a monster rating and a great event. And last night, look, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is amongst a handful of young players, of which you mentioned 4 or 5 of them, that I really feel like are sort of grabbing the bull by the horns and taking baseball into its future, into the next generation. When you say that baseball really hasn't ever replaced Derek Jeter in terms of having a face, that's not something that we're using lightly. We actually have a way to measure this. And when ESPN asks sports fans, who is your favorite baseball player, more of them say Derek Jeter than any other active player.
To this day.
To this day, as in 2020 data that I obtained last week from our fan and media intelligence group. So in other words, these young players have the opportunity to take that mantle. Which one does it? That's what's most interesting to me.
Well, there was a moment in time, and anyone old enough will remember it, when there was I believe it was Sports Illustrated cover photo that had 3 young, budding superstars who all played the same position at that time. And one of them was Derek Jeter, and one of them was Alex, and the other was Nomar Garciaparra. And the 3 of them all panned out. Mm-hmm. They all turned out to be great players, and they played. Alex didn't, but the other 2 played, in these legendary franchises and all that kind of stuff, the Yankee-Red Sox thing. There were a lot of ways that all got built up. One way or another, this feels like maybe they try to head down that direction. I'm a little tired as one I love the sport, and I've loved it all my life. It is just so fashionable and easy to just say bad things about baseball. And I think one of the they bring some of that on themselves. I have to be fair. They bring some of that on themselves. A lot of the labor stuff, a lot of people still have sort of hard feelings about that. A lot of the steroid thing has stuck to them in memory more than it has to other sports, even though I think they went further into it than anybody else did. People attach a lot of negative stuff to them. And then there's another reason, and that is that it is the hardest sport in which to live in the minutia, which is to say, if you're a talk show host like me, baseball is a sport that you have to live in every minute, every single day, if you're going to cover it the way we cover basketball and the way we cover football. And that's much harder to do because in basketball, there's 3 games on television on a given night, and they have 7 stars, and that's really all anybody wants to talk about. In football, they play once a week, and you can throw a dart in any direction, and fans are going to be interested. In baseball, if you're going to cover it the way you would cover other sports, you're going to be getting into a pitching change that was made in the 7th inning last night, and taking your starter out now, and all these, and the stuff that you can't live in this. So instead, the easier topics are, well, what's going on here? Is this bad? Spider tag, steroids, all that kind of stuff. So what I want to try and do here, Straight Talk Wireless, no contract, no compromise, is live in a place where we're going to celebrate these young, good players in baseball, and let's be into it. Season starts, second half of the season starts tomorrow. Yankees-Red Sox standalone game. Very interesting. A lot of really good teams in the hunt. Let's see what winds up happening.
Baseball has gone through plenty of ebbs and flows historically, but you know what has always saved it? The players. The players have always saved it because the players are the ones we care about. They're the talented ones that can save the game no matter how much the game tries to get in the way. And the fact that yesterday I got to watch a 22-year-old Vladimir Guerrero Jr. hit a 470-foot home run while Fernando Tatis Jr., another 22-year-old, was mic'd up live when it happened is about as cool as it gets. That's where baseball is going, and that's where baseball needs to go.
Yeah. Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.